Coming up on Market to Market, selection of the new cabinet is completed with a nod to the South. As the hottest year on record ends, rhetoric heats up on Capitol Hill. And city dwellers see the urbane side of rural America. Those stories and market analysis with Angie Setzer. Next.
Funding for Market to Market is provided by Grinnell Mutual. You think differently about a customer when you stand in the middle of his dreams. We work to make sure you get covered right. Grinnell Mutual, a policy of working together. Information on finding an agent near you is available at grinnellmutual.com. And by Sukup Manufacturing Company, offering a full line of grain drying and storage equipment and steel buildings. Sukup Manufacturing is on a mission to protect and preserve your crop and the tools that produce it. This is the Friday, January 20 edition of Market to Market, the weekly journal of rural America.
Hello, I'm Mike Pearson. As the last bits of data are squeezed out of 2016, it appears the cost of a good meal went down, but the price for getting to the restaurant went up. As the year came to a close, prices for goods and services rose 2.1% on a food and fuel seesaw. The annualized inflation rate, without those volatile elements, revealed prices rose 2.2% over the last 12 months. U.S. home builders also had a good year, one of the best since 2007. And Creighton University's Rural Main Street Index stayed below growth neutral for the 17th time as concerns over loan defaults were balanced against higher land prices. As rural America continues to hold its own against market forces, the question of who will lead one of the nation's largest federal agencies was answered this week. Peter Tubbs has a profile of President Trump's choice for Secretary of Agriculture.
President-elect Trump completed his first cabinet by naming former Georgia Governor Sonny Perdue to head the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Perdue, who grew up on a Georgia farm and earned a doctorate in veterinary medicine, would be the first Southern State Ag Secretary since Mike Espy of Mississippi held the job in 1993 and 1994. As governor of Georgia, Perdue focused on cost savings, efficiency, and customer service in government. If confirmed, Perdue would oversee an agency with over 100,000 employees that work in every part of America's food supply chain. One of Perdue's toughest tasks may be implementing the 2019 Farm Bill at the point it is signed into law. Negotiating the terms of the Farm Bill have been contentious in the past and often pit Midwestern corn and soybean growers against southern rice and cotton farmers over subsidies. As governor, Perdue's strong religious beliefs led him to hold a prayer service on the grounds of the Georgia Capitol to pray for the end of the severe drought in 2007.
And I'm here today to appeal to you and to all Georgians and all people who believe in the power of prayer to ask God to shower our state, our region, our nation with the blessings of water.
The drought continued for 18 months. Dates for Perdue's confirmation hearing have yet to be set. For Market to Market, I'm Peter Tubbs.
As President Trump called for solidarity following his oath of office Friday, the vetting of his cabinet remains incomplete. Paul Yeager has this week's Capitol Hill Roundup.
Another round of atypical heavy rain in the southeast this week. In Houston, Texas, drivers were stranded after the 5-inch deluge. The more than 2.2 million residents of the city were asked to avoid travel midweek. In the West, nearly 6 years of drought could be waning as heavy rain and snow have recharged reservoirs. This look at Hume Lake east of Fresno, California, reveals the difference moisture can make. The nation's drought level is the lowest since June, and in the Golden State, conditions improved for the 7th straight report. Also this week, 3 scientific agencies stated 2016 was the 3rd straight record hot year, blaming man-made global warming with assistance from El Nino.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Donald Trump in 2012 tweeted, "The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese."
You have filed and participated in several lawsuits against the EPA's involvement.
That narrative played out in 3 different committee rooms on Capitol Hill this week.
Donald Trump has called global warming a hoax caused by the Chinese. Do you agree that global warming is a hoax?
I do not, Senator.
So Donald Trump is wrong?
I do not believe that climate change is a hoax.
Okay, that's important for the president to hear.
And the line of questioning also faced Trump's nominee for Interior Secretary, Congressman Ryan Zinke.
His man is at an influence. I think that's undisputable as well. So climate is changing, man is in influence. I think where there's debate on it is what that influence is, what can we do about it? And as the Department of Interior, I will inherit, if confirmed, the USGS. We have great scientists there. I'm not a climate scientist expert, but I can tell you I will become a lot more familiar with it, and it'll be based on objective science. I don't believe it's a hoax. I believe we should.
You do not believe it's a hoax?
No, I believe we should be prudent to be prudent.
And Department of Energy nominee, former Texas Governor Rick Perry addressed the expanding droughts and volatile temperature swings in his opening remarks.
I believe the climate is changing. I believe some of it is naturally occurring, but some of it is caused by man-made activity. The question is how we address it in a thoughtful way that doesn't compromise economic growth. It affects the affordability of energy or American jobs.
For Market to Market, I'm Paul Yeager.
Midwestern farmers take most of the blame for the Gulf of Mexico's dead zone, an area that fails to support aquatic life. Nevertheless, several stewards of the land have taken up the challenge of reducing farm runoff, but their efforts often go unnoticed due to the remote nature of their work. However, Josh Bittner found a place where rural Americans show off their labors.
In 2015, Iowa's largest drinking water provider elected to sue farm drainage districts in 3 counties upstream, alleging excess nitrate runoff from fertilizers plagues efforts to comply with federal guidelines. The Raccoon River is the major source of potable water for 500,000 ratepayers in the vicinity of the state's capital city, Des Moines. Trial awaits this spring.
We're very confident that these are clear point source groundwater polluters that are coming from agricultural use.
While the overlap of various Environmental Protection Agency guidelines allows for an astute argument as to responsibility on the issue, the electoral wave that brought Donald Trump into office could see an undoing of clean water protections under Scott Pruitt, the new president's pick to lead EPA. Regardless, many in rural America remain proactive. Various producers, commodity groups, and politicians at the local and national level have called for widespread adoption of voluntary conservation methods, a strategic bypass against any potentially intrusive new laws. And though water quality efforts went nowhere in last year's assembly, many expect the Iowa legislature to finally take action in 2017.
I'm not sure a lot of people in Iowa even knew where Calhoun County was before this lawsuit.
But farmer and author Darcy Malsby, who traces her lineage to a Century farm near the small town of Yetter in one of the counties named in the lawsuit, hopes a dose of rural hospitality could help mend fences.
I'd noticed this growing trend towards a rift between rural Iowa and urban Iowa, and that really troubled me.
Malsby envisioned a journey, bringing farm and city stakeholders together to help elevate the level of discourse. And after partnering with local nonprofit Iowa Food and Family Project, the Iowa Soybean Association, and several other food industry groups, tourists of diverse backgrounds loaded up in Des Moines early one morning last summer for the maiden voyage of Expedition Yetter.
A lot of people think Iowa's flat, but if you look a little closer, it really isn't. It has a lot of undulation to the landscape.
Factoids about rural America were sprinkled throughout the bus ride.
You will find that soybean oil is the #1 ingredient in your Hellmann's mayonnaise. The soybeans that are grown that produce the oil for that product are sourced from a 60-mile radius around Des Moines, Iowa. Welcome. How are you? Thanks for coming on board.
The first stop on the tour was Bruce Wessling's family farm outside Grand Junction.
we believe in what we do and we consume the products that we raise, and I want other people to feel safe doing the same thing.
Westling shared the intricacies of his row crop and pig operations, explaining how manure management plans help livestock owners safeguard against health concerns and abide by natural resource regulations.
You know, I feel like our operation's kind of a complete circle from growing the corn, feeding the livestock, putting the nutrients back on the soil.
Former University of Iowa and NFL quarterback Chuck Long hitched a ride as well. He marveled at the culmination of knowledge found on today's farms.
It's just fascinating what, with technology now and the machinery that they use, how streamlined and precise they can get.
Nostalgia sprouted for one Sioux City school teacher who shared family memories of hard work.
My dad did farm drainage tiling a long time ago in the 80s, and so there was no GPS then, and I helped him quite a bit.
We have this underground drainage system.
Agritourism ventures like Expedition Yetter have grown in popularity over recent years. According to USDA's 2012 Census of Agriculture, more than 33,000 farms integrated tourism and recreational services into their repertoire. As of the last available figures, activities like winery tours, hay rides, hunting, and fishing represent over $700 million in annual revenue for enterprising American landowners, a nearly $150 million increase over 2007's Ag Census numbers. So far, the largest returns have come mostly in western states, which earned revenues of up to $24 million in certain counties. By contrast, Iowa tops out annually around $350,000. But again, USDA figures are now several years old. Organizers like Malsby see more opportunities for migrations through the countryside, citing the demand for reconciliation of rural and urban issues.
If you think about it, the air that we're breathing is 78% nitrogen. Those plants will take that nitrogen out of the air, fix it, and use it to help their own growth.
Rounding out the jaunt, bus riders visited David Osberger's 1,700-acre corn and soybean operation near Jefferson. A fourth-generation producer, Osberger and his family have practiced no-till farming for decades to minimize erosion.
And I'm really conscientious about soil compaction.
Osberger has converted unproductive land to wetland habitat, added buffer strips, and cover crops. He says the approach benefits nature and future farm generations, but admits it takes a strong level of commitment to stay on track.
So it's a whole systems approach, and it's not something that you go into lightly.
As farmers attempt to chip away at looming litigation with voluntary efforts, many agree time is the most precious commodity of all. Farm community members say there are no quick fixes for ever-present nitrates in Corn Belt creeks and streams. And if Des Moines Waterworks should win, farming could go under a regulatory microscope. But some see the benefits of a spotlight shining on Iowa agriculture.
In a way, I'm glad that the lawsuit has put the attention on agriculture because we can show how complex this whole water quality issue is. We're happy to open up the barn door and invite people in. Yay! We're all Iowans, we're all in this together.
For Market to Market, I'm Josh Bittner.
Next, the Market to Market report.
Exports to destinations unknown and potentially overbought markets saw the grain trade test post-harvest highs. For the week, March wheat gained 2 cents, and the nearby corn contract moved 11 cents higher. Wet South American weather clashed with an overbought market to push the soy complex higher as the March contract closed up 21 cents. March meal put on $14.80 per ton. In the softs, March cotton added 42 cents per hundredweight. Over in the dairy parlor, February Class 3 milk futures were up 35 cents. The livestock sector was mixed as the April cattle contract gained 44 cents, March feeders grew by $1.97, and the April lean hog contract shed $1.15. In the currency markets, the U.S. dollar index was off 50 basis points. Crude oil gained 85 cents per barrel. Gold kept its positive streak going, rising $8.70 per ounce, and the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index declined 0.5 point to finish the week at $399.30. Here now to lend us her insight on these and other trends is one of our regular market analysts, Angie Setzer. Angie, welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Before we get started, you can listen to our market discussion anytime by downloading our market analysis podcast on our website, iptv.org/MTOM. Angie, let's jump right in with this wheat market. We have seen an interesting trade between the Chicago wheat and especially the Minneapolis spring wheat contract. Talk to us a little bit about what is taking place in these markets.
Well, it shows you right now, we had some pretty major issues last fall getting the crop off in the northern and western portions, northern U.S. and then the western portions of Canada there. So the high protein wheat has been in demand, and good quality high protein wheat that is typically up in that region has been a little bit hard to come by. So you've seen a rally take place in that market structure that really hasn't been seen in the areas that have those burdensome stocks. First of all, Chicago wheat is a soft red wheat, so it's a lower protein, and then your hard red wheat stocks in the southern plains aren't really capable of getting up to the northern portions of the United States all that easily. So it's really a specific protein driven type rally that you're seeing.
But we have seen that Chicago contract continue to find not a lot of strength. It's tough to call it a bull market, but it has been a gradual increase over the past several weeks.
It's better. I mean, we've seen the March contract, I believe, close at the highest level it's been at since last October. So which is sad because it was 420 something. So that's been difficult, but it actually has found a floor. So that is good. And now we'll start paying attention to the northern hemisphere growing season. We've put to bed the southern hemisphere for the most part. I think Argentina is just getting wrapped up with harvest. Australia had a huge crop. So those surprises have been, or those knowns in the market are now put away. Now we're focusing on the new crop development side of things, and we have the lowest wheat acres, winter wheat acres on that have been planted since 1909. So that's saying something. Stocks are still burdensome, but it's similar to what we're seeing in soybeans. The demand for wheat is so great that we really can't withstand a production hiccup anywhere in the world. So it will be monitored very closely. Even with high stocks in the U.S., any production issues in the northern hemisphere next year could really result in the push higher. People always talk about global stocks in wheat. China's sitting on 44%. I would imagine half of that 44% is probably pretty reasonable bug food. You could sell it as higher protein, but they probably wouldn't at this point.
So we've still got some room with any cold snaps that come through a lot of those non-snow covered wheat growing areas. We could get a nice little pop in this thing.
We could, yeah. We've seen the funds quietly trim down that short position that they've had, so there's not as much ammunition as what we would have seen perhaps had something happened the tail end of October or something like that. But it's still there. I definitely am anticipating a pop to the market, especially if we get a cold snap. And I question what we'll see happen with this recent warming trend. If we start to hear concern that the wheat's coming out of dormancy, then we turn really cold really suddenly, there could be some issues.
All right, well, then let's talk about this corn market. Angie, you are a cash grain trader. That is your day job. We've got a question here from Roger in Kokomo, Indiana. He wants to know, are these the best basis numbers we'll see in old crop corn?
The potential is there. He's in the Eastern Corn Belt. So there are two very different markets set up. There have been. The haves and have-nots are still very clear. We saw it in the quarterly stocks numbers released last week. If you're in areas, the Dakotas, Minnesota, parts of Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, etc., if you're on the western side, yes, the potential is very much there that these are some of the better basis levels that you're going to see because there's a lot of grain out there that'll need to move into the pipeline. More so once we see what the next growing season looks like and get a feel for acres and stuff like that, you'll see more move this way, or if the futures continue higher. Eastern Corn Belt's a little different. We've got some quality issues and things like that are starting to pop up. If you've got low VOM corn in Indiana, Ohio, or Michigan, it is going to be worth something. If you've got the higher VOM corn, you're probably better to move it sooner than later because those market structures could plug up here eventually. So it's hard to say based on wherever you are, but if we see futures continue higher, higher and stay supported, then yeah, basis levels could struggle to move higher until we hit those times of the year that tend to typically slow down in the off-farm movement, planting, things like that.
You bet. Farmers get busy and
yep, you could see
perfect.
some opportunity.
New crop corn, real quick. Are you seeing a lot of contracts being written up here close to $4?
We're starting.
Okay.
At this level, I think it's a good place to get started. Starting at this place last year and the year prior were good decisions.
Yep. And hopefully it's your cheapest corn of the year.
That's what I say. I definitely hope so.
Well, Angie, I want to talk to you about soybeans. I want to start with the old crop soybean market. March beans have been on a tear now for 2 weeks. Are we getting to the top end of this? Have the funds bought all they can buy?
To me, I think so until a production issue arises in Brazil. If something happens in Brazil. Right now, Argentina's getting good play. You know, I really question with Argentina, though. When you look at the carryout numbers the USDA has pegged, there is talk that Argentina could lose anywhere from 150 to 300 million bushel of soybean production potential, which is a lot in the global pipeline. But Argentina this year is expected to have a carryout of 1.2 billion. So the best thing for them to have at this point would be a production issue, because then that would help to get them. Those beans are going to have to come to the market eventually. Yeah. So if they have a carryout like the USDA says they do, you shouldn't see a glitch in their bean supply.
Okay.
Because they should be coming to market. The market should pull those out of holding. If they don't, if they're unable to, and we see something develop on that side, then I think we are going to have to reevaluate how many stocks they have on hand.
Okay.
But to me, without a production issue in Brazil, you know, we saw a private estimate come out yesterday of 90 million acres of soybeans planted this coming year. You know, and we are
here domestically.
Here domestically in the U.S. Yes. So that could be a wet blanket on the market in the short term. Just thinking about what that could mean from an overall supply and demand outlook
And
without
we're
a production
north of $10 on the new crop beans.
Yeah.
Would you be looking to make some sales right
We
in
have
here?
been right along. Yep. These numbers are the higher levels that we've seen. November has bounced back up towards that 1035 range. 1040, I think, was the highest level that we had seen it hit there the first part of December. I think those are good numbers, unless a weather issue develops in the United States or we see something hit Brazil at the tail end, which they have such a long growing season. You know, a lot of traders are going to be holding their breath until mid-March.
We saw it happen last year.
Yes.
Let's jump down and look at the livestock markets. We've got live cattle continuing to move higher on the week, kind of defying expectations. Angie, how high can this live cattle market climb?
At this point, there is talk that the cattle on feed, I've heard whispers that cattle on feed February 1st could come in incredibly low. And now take it with a grain of salt, because you never really know what the USDA is going to come out with. And of course, cattle on feed could be a skewed determining factor as to how you want to trade your live cattle.
Right.
Just because of what goes into that report. But so there have been some talk there. Packers, I had solid margin and were slaughtering really heavily. So the supply that was ready to go into the cattle market, the fat market, has kind of dwindled. So from what I'm understanding out there, you know, with the weather being nasty and all of the other things that we've had, you're seeing your fats kind of trade towards a high level, the highest we've seen since last March.
Okay.
So if you have them and you can bring them and you want to take advantage of that, in my opinion, could we see continued strength? Sure.
Okay.
One thing that's been interesting, though, the feeders have kind of stalled out at late last summer. In several times that I've been on prior, we've discussed the high amount of feeders, I think, that are in the pipeline, and the continuation, I think, of seeing them come into the pipeline. So I think that's part of where that stalling has come from.
Okay.
But it'll be interesting to see how we move forward, you know, with the demand is out there, obviously,
right.
For good high quality protein.
All right. And now we do have a question from Greg in Almro, Wisconsin. He's asked about the Holstein numbers and the real huge discount and basis Holstein feeders have faced. Angie and I will talk about this, and you can find it on our Market Plus discussion. A lot goes into that issue, so we'll bring that up. Find us online at our website, iptv.org/MTOM. Thanks for asking, Greg. Angie, I want to talk to you about this lean hog market.
Yeah.
We've been plugging along right up in here in the 60s. We pulled back this week. What happened, I guess? What have you been hearing? Cash still seems strong? Packers are still profitable?
Packers are still profitable.
The futures pulling back?
I mean, I think when it all comes down to it, all we heard about when they were supposedly going to zero here 4 or 5 months ago, maybe not even that long ago. It's hard. Time melds together over the holidays. But all we kept hearing about was the supply, you know, and the demand's there. And we've seen solid exports, so that's been beneficial. We've seen a continuation of that side of things. To me, right now, looking at it, and I'm more of a hog consumer than I am a hog trader. I like my bacon. But looking at it, it seems as though we're consolidating. We got a rally after the election. We moved higher just on the thought that the world's going to be looking for extra protein out there, and that's going to be a continuation on that side of things. But I think we're consolidating right now, and we're probably going to break out either, and I hate to say that, we're consolidating, we're going to break out either much higher or much lower, unfortunately. And with the move lower this week, I think we're just testing the bottom side of that consolidating range to see if perhaps we have some support to jump off from.
Okay. Now, you set up an interesting scenario with this consolidation, with the potential for a breakout, higher or lower. If I'm a pork producer, how can I manage some risk when I'm looking at volatility moving one way or the other? Could be fairly substantial if a breakout happens.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing you want to do is, if you don't have the ability to bring it to market or bring them to market at this point in time, would probably be to look at some put options, something to cover your downside risk is what I would do. With the prices being higher, I wouldn't necessarily worry about pocketing the upside just because they are higher, and that's going to have a cost associated with it that may or may not give you something back. It depends on how much you enjoy gambling, if you're going to be looking at calls or something like that. But if you don't have the ability to sell into the market at this point in time, I don't think it's a bad idea to perhaps explore your option strategies that you could look into.
Up here at these higher levels. Well, Angie Setzer, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
I always enjoy it.
That wraps up the broadcast portion of Market to Market, but Angie and I will keep the market conversation going, including answering more of your questions during Market Plus, which is available on our website. While you're there, check out this week's M2M podcast, where one of our analysts explains how music and markets work together. And join us again next week on the broadcast, when we'll look at how opposing forces found common ground fighting for the Mississippi River. So until then, thanks for watching. I'm Mike Pearson. Have a great week.
Market to Market is a production of Iowa Public Television, which is solely responsible for its content. Funding for Market to Market is provided by Grinnell Mutual. You think differently about a customer when you stand in the middle of his dreams. We work to make sure you get covered right. Grinnell Mutual, a policy of working together. Information on finding an agent near you is available at grinnellmutual.com. And by Sukup Manufacturing Company. Offering a full line of grain drying and storage equipment and steel buildings, Sukup Manufacturing is on a mission to protect and preserve your crop and the tools that produce it.